Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. I finally got my 2023 Ford Bronco Raptor that I had been waiting for 16 months. Now, I've had this car for almost 3 months, but I never got a chance to actually do a full review on it. But today I'm going to give you a full review of this Ford Bronco Raptor. This is not my first Ford Raptor. I also had a 2022 Ford F-150 Raptor in Code Orange, and I've had plenty of other orange cars, which is actually my favorite color. It's just something about that color orange that gets my attention. In today's episode, I'm going to give you a full review of this Ford Bronco Raptor by telling you a little bit about the history of this car, about the wheels, brakes, suspension, engine of this car, the styling, interior of this car, and towards the end, we're going to be taking this car for a nice drive down the Pacific Coast Highway and tell you what the experience of driving this vehicle is. And if you guys like the contents of this channel, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. That's one of the ways that gets this channel growing, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you. All right, now let's tell you a little bit more about this Ford Bronco Raptor. But before doing so, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Ford and how they came about building the Bronco model in their lineup. Ford built the Bronco model to compete with Jeep CJ5 and International Harvester Scout. And throughout these years, it was a very, very popular model. And for those of you that are old enough, you remember that O.J. Simpson was in a white Ford Bronco and he was running away from the cops. A couple of interesting things to notice is that in 1978, they made the bigger Bronco, which was meant to compete against Chevrolet K5 Blazer and Dodge Ram Charger. Ford in 1984 through 1990 built Ford Bronco 2, which is a small short wheelbase. However, in 1996, the fifth generation of Ford Bronco was to be the last one due to low sales volume. And in 1998, Ford replaced the Bronco with Expedition, which was a bigger SUV, and later on an Excursion, which was even bigger than that. After 25 years of hiatus, in 2021, Ford reintroduced the Bronco. They introduced two levels of Bronco. They introduced Bronco Sport, which is a smaller crossover SUV, starting off at $31,000 all the way about $39,000 in the 5 trim levels that you can get. And they also introduced 2-door or 4-door versions of Ford Bronco, which starts at about $38,000 and it goes all the way to $89,000 if you want to get one of these Bronco Raptors. And out of the 9 trim levels that are being offered in the Ford Bronco, this is the hardest one to get, and that's why I had to wait 16 months to get this car. All right, now let's talk about one of the most important things about this car. It's the engine and the transmission of this car. This Ford Bronco Raptor comes with a 3.0 liter EcoBoost twin turbo V6. It pumps out about 418 horsepower and 440 pound-feet of torque. All of this power is made into the ground via a 10-speed automatic transmission, and the 0-60 of this car is about 5.9 seconds all the way to 6.3 seconds. It's worth mentioning that Ford built a special exhaust system for this car, and it sounds really, really good, especially when you have it on sport mode. Take a listen. And now this car weighs about 5,733 pounds, and it can actually tow about 4,500 pounds. The fuel economy of this car, if you were interested, which a lot of people are not interested when they buy this type of car, 50 miles per gallon in the city and 60 miles per gallon in the highway. Moving on and talking about the wheels, brakes, and suspension of this car, it's worth mentioning that this car comes with standard 37-inch wheels, which is the biggest and largest that you can get from factory. And for the people that like to take this car on off-roading scenes, they definitely like to brag about the fact that this car comes with 37-inch wheels. And the tires are BF Goodrich All-Terrain KO2s. As far as the braking system of this car, the fronts have 14-inch rotors, dual piston sliding caliper, and the rears have 13.4-inch single piston sliding calipers. Now, one thing to mention about the suspension of this car, it comes with the Raptor Haas 4.0 high-performance off-road stability suspension system with Fox live valve shocks and Fox internal bypass, semi-active dampers. There are integrated reservoirs in the front and remote reservoirs in the rear. And for the people that like to off-road this car, the suspension travel in the front is 13 inches and 14 inches in the rear. The car comes with GOAT system. It goes over any type of terrain, and the dial is actually in the center console. And it has a 2-speed transfer case with 4H, 4L, and 4A mode for automatic on-demand engagement. All right, now let's talk a little bit about the styling of this Ford Bronco Raptor. One of the things that strikes you when you see this car is this massive grille that says Ford on it. Obviously, you see the amber lights, the 3 in the front, because this car's width is over 80 inches, and per DOT, Department of Transportation, you have to have these amber lights in the front, and you're going to also have 3 in the rear. And then one of the most exciting things when I look at this car is the steel bumper with these 2 rigid fog lights. Now, one of them is technically for off-road, but I took the cap off of it, but it just looks so cool. Then you got these massive hooks that you can, if somebody's stuck or you're stuck, that I don't think it's possible, but you can be dragged out of the situation. And you got this little opening right here to cool down this intercooler for this twin turbo engine that you see in this car. Then you have this massive skid plate underneath this car that is going to protect the oil pan and the transmission, and it extends kind of far underneath the car. And I love looking at these control arms. I mean, look at the size of these things. They are massive. They're bigger than Tyrannosaurus Rex's femoral bone. And one more thing that is very interesting when you look at this car is the hood of this car, that it has the heat distractor, that actually some of the heat escapes from the engine and it helps it obviously cool down. And I love how Ford put the amber lights as the daytime running lights, and these are the actual low beam lights. And then when you turn on the turn signal, they start blinking. Moving to the side of this car, you absolutely cannot miss this 6-inch of fender flares that you see on the front and in the rear that is even wider. It just gives characteristics to this car, and that's obviously enough to house these 37-inch wheels in this car. I really like how on the front fenders you got these gills or slits that also help some of this heat that is produced in this EcoBoost engine escape. And it's interesting how Ford has also put these amber lights in the front that match the 3 that you saw in the front grille. And on the rear is red because it also matches what the lights in the rear look like. And the side profile of this car is obviously nice and boxy. You can see how you can take off the front panels, mid panel, and also the rear panel to make this car completely topless and open. And even the doors can actually come off as well. So that's actually pretty unique, and it gives you that Jeep experience. And that's obviously the car that Ford was trying to tackle as far as competing against. On the bottom, obviously you have the rock sliders with the word Raptor printed on it. And as you notice, this is a 4-door. Bronco Raptors only come in 4-door. And another thing worth mentioning is that you can actually move the fender flares both in the rear and in the front if you're a hardcore off-roader. Moving on to the rear, obviously a nice clean finish. You got your LED taillights, and you have the rear brake light also serving in as the 3 red lights for the DOT mandate, because this car is wider than 80 inches. If I'm not mistaken, it's 88 inches in width. And you got the little horse representing the Bronco, and you got a full-size tire in the rear. And obviously I had the wheel lock option, and this is where your rear camera is when you back up the car. And the rear tailgate of this car opens up by pulling this handle, and this is the access area, but also the window. You can just go like this and it comes up. It's very nice and light. And this is where, if you take off the front panel, you can actually put them in here. And actually you have a decent amount of room in the back. You have a subwoofer here. You also have a 12-volt plug. You got some lights here. And the rear seats, you can actually fold them down as well. You got a little bit more room over here. So this car does have some practicality. And if you want to use it in your urban dwellings and do some grocery shopping, you can actually do that. I really like how this nice brace that you see here, and it's got the word Ford Performance on it. It actually gives it a nice character. So when you take off the side panels of this car, you can definitely see this big orange structure that is meant to fortify the suspension of this car. Moving on to the interior of this Ford Bronco, I like when you first open the door of this car, you're greeted with this image of a Ford Bronco, although it's not in code orange, but it's actually pretty neat. And you have the Ford Performance displayed on the infotainment screen. Another thing that I really like about the interior of this car are these seats. They're very sporty, they hug you, but they're comfortable, and they just do the job really well. And I like the word Raptor that is printed on it. They're also nice and stitched on the sides. They're a little bit of red stitching, and then you got some white stitching over here. It's actually, Ford has done a good job. Now, these are not the premium seats. The premium seats are the Recaro seats with blue inserts, and mine also didn't come with a power option, but I've never really had to adjust them too much, so I'm very perfectly satisfied with the car. And let's talk about the doors a little bit. Obviously, these are frameless doors. You can take them off if you choose to, but they do the job. They're very basic. There's no cup holders inside of them, but they got this little area that you can put a bottle or two. Then obviously you have the unlock and lock. The power windows are actually in here. Since you can take off these doors, they didn't want to put any wires in there. So the controls for the windows and the windows are actually right where the armrest is. Speaking of the armrest, it's very nice and comfortable. It has some stitching on there, and it has the word Raptor printed on it as well. Another area that you see Raptor printed is on the bottom of the steering wheel, and it's actually pretty nice. And I love this steering wheel because it actually reminds me of the F-150 Raptor that I had. It has a little orange ring on top of it. The leather wrapped steering wheel is very comfortable with some stitching on the side of it, which is actually pretty cool. And when you turn on this car, you're greeted by this digital 12-inch screen. On the left side, you have your tachometer. The right side, you have your speedometer. Then you have your fuel gauge. You have the temperature for the turbos. You have the oil pressure, the temperature for the coolants. And you got obviously a few other things that you want to check. And I like how the steering wheel has the negative and positive. These are for if you want to change the gears manually yourself. And it's got enough buttons to choose for like cruise control, volume of the car. Then you have right here, just like my F-150 Raptor that I had, steering. You can choose the steering option. You have your R mode, which is your Raptor mode. Then you have your exhaust options that you can change, you know, going from normal to sport to Baja to quiet. And you know, the dampers, you have your normal, sport, and off-road. And obviously the steering, you have normal, comfort, and sport. Now moving on to the infotainment screen, you can have two things running on this 12-inch infotainment screen, like, you know, checking the off-road status, the zone lighting, you know, pitch, audio, different things. And then also you can have your navigation system or your stereo system in here as well. This car does come with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, which is actually convenient. A lot of cars now come with that. Then coming down, you have your volume button, you have your different cameras, your automatic shut off button right here, park sensor, different thing for tuning the stereo system. And you have your dual climate digital control that you can change with the knob, which is actually pretty cool. You don't have to go to the screen and change it. Then you have your heated steering wheel option. You have your heated seats for the driver. There's 3 settings, and heated seats for the passenger, also 3 settings. Rear windows, obviously you can do that. Then you can adjust the fan speed here, 2, 3, 4, 5, or down, which is actually pretty convenient. Then coming down right here, you have your wireless charger for your phone, and you also have a couple of USB inputs in here, which is pretty convenient. Then I really like how Ford has put a picture of the front grille of the Bronco right here, and you got this handle right here, which is actually kind of unique and gives this car a little bit of character. Then on the gear itself, you have a printed Bronco, and I love how you have an American flag right here. Then how obviously you switch the gear from park all the way to drive, but you also can put it in manual that you can change the gears yourself. And one of my favorite things is this. This is the go over any trail mode, so you can switch it. You go from normal, if you go to the left, then to sport, then to tow and haul, and then slippery, and then you can come back. You can also go to off-road, Baja, rock crawl, which is actually pretty cool. So these are about 9 different settings that you can put this car in. And another thing about this car is how you take the panels off. So if you want to take the panels off and go topless, you have to take the driver's side. You got these different things right here. Then you gotta unhook this, then this, and this. Then it actually kind of comes off, so you can put it in the back of the car. And also right after drivers, then you gotta do the passengers. Then you can also take the midsection off as well. And as I mentioned, you can take off the whole rear as well. Cool factor to mention about this car, these all-weather mats that you see on this car, they're actually pretty unique. You can clip them on, clip them off, but watch what we have right here. You have actually a little drain right here that you can take off just in case this car had a lot of water inside of it, and this will take the water out of the car, which is actually pretty cool. Moving on to the back seat area, there is actually enough room, to be honest with you. Now the front seat of this car are all the way in the back. I'm about 5'9", and I do have enough room in front of me. On the back of the driver and passenger seat, I really like how Ford has put down this pattern, and you also have a little area that you can put some stuff on. It's the same pattern that you saw on the driver's side and also the passengers. And this is where you can put your cup or something. There's instructions how you can move the door if you want to take it off. I guess you have to lift it down. And also the power windows in the rear, much like the front, are in the center because Ford didn't want to have any wires over there. Then right here you have a couple of USB plugs, and then you actually have a 110 volt plug in here. And I like how Ford has said do not step right here. But it does have a decent amount of room and definitely a lot of headroom as well. All right, we're gonna take this Ford Bronco Raptor on a little drive. It is 6:30 in the morning on one of my favorite areas to drive called Pacific Coast Highway. It's in Huntington Beach, parallel to Pacific Ocean, and I really like driving here. There's not much traffic. Now we have the car in normal mode. I'm gonna switch it to sport mode and get a little bit more power out of this car, and we're gonna just give it a gas. Whoa, my God, as soon as I punch the gas, you can definitely feel the throttle response. It's a lot faster, and it actually downshifted so it can get more power out of this 10-speed transmission car. Now this car has 418 horsepower and about 440 pound-feet of torque out of a 3-liter twin-turbo EcoBoost engine. And it does a 0-60 anywhere between 5.9 to 6.3 seconds for a vehicle that weighs about almost 3 tons, 5,700 pounds. That is pretty impressive. When you drive this car, it's very comfortable. If you drive it in normal mode, in sport mode, obviously the steering wheel, the exhaust, and the shocks, the dampers are a lot more engaged. So, and you just feel like you're in command of the road because it's so high off the road and it's so wide. You just feel really safe. And I never have a dull moment with this car. I'm hoping that Ford actually puts a 5.2 liter V8 supercharged engine in this car. I don't know whether they're gonna do it or not, like how they did it in F-150 Raptor R, but if they do that, this truck will be absolutely amazing, because then it can really beat its competitor, which is the Jeep 392 that has a 6.2 liter Hemi engine. If Ford puts a 700 horsepower 5.2 liter V8 supercharged engine in Bronco Raptor, it will definitely blow off the door off of the Jeep 392. Driving this Ford Bronco Raptor is definitely filled with miles per gallon. Yes, SPG, not miles per gallon, because it only gives you 50 miles per gallon, and I've been averaging about 13 miles per gallon in the past 2,100 miles. If you're looking to get a car that is good on fuel economy, this is not the car for you. But the fun factor of this car is off the roof. And as you already know, the era of internal combustion engine cars unfortunately is going to come to an end. They're either going to be hybrid or they're going to be fully electrified. And it's just sad because these cars, they just have so much more fun to them. They're not good for the environment, but the fun factor of these cars is not comparable to their electric or hybrid versions. I'm very happy that I got a chance to share my experience of owning this 2023 Ford Bronco Raptor and how it drives and feels and looks and all those things that go with it. And looking forward to drive more high performance SUVs and trucks in the future, and again share that experience with you.